So it's been about a month since our last project, and even though these tanks didn't take 4 weeks to make, the research that went into them did. I'm going to show you 4 ways Shinto has influenced me to be more original. Whenever I start a new build, I usually have a vague idea of what I want to do. For this project, I wanted to do something that incorporated Buddha statue with Japanese influence. If you've ever seen Buddha statues, you'd know they come in a variety of styles, and that's because of different forms of Buddhism. So I had to get this right. After several days of research into making the right type of Buddha sculpture for my terrarium, I stumbled across Shintoism. There was a few things about Shinto that really fueled my creativity. Shintoism, in simple terms, is the worship of nature. I felt like I was definitely onto something. It's Shinto belief that spirits inhabit all the things around us. These spirits or deities are referred to as kami. You're probably thinking right now, what does it have to do with Buddha, and when are we getting to the terrariums? Stay with me, I promise this is all gonna make sense in a few seconds. So, before Buddhism was introduced to Japan from China and Korea in the 6th century, Shintoism was the indigenous religion of the land. With Shinto being so tolerant and accepting to other religions, the pursuit of self-enlightenment that Buddhists preach was easily accepted among Shinto natives. Currently today, many Japanese recognize themselves as both Shinto and Buddhism. That very acceptance brought the influence of Buddhist imagery, which is the tradition of visual symbolization in sacred beings. Where's my sculptures? They're in the other room. Damn it. In Japan, they refer to these types of art representations as Shinzo. Now, this kami isn't modeled after any specific deity, but I found the inspiration to sculpt it based on reference photos of wooden art made during the 9th century. With my idea of the perfect embodiment of a Buddhist-influenced Shinzo sculpture, the idea of the terrarium I wanted to create is underway. My vision for this one was to portray a sort of abandoned ruin scene, somewhere deep in the jungle. With a dark contrast of colors throughout the substrate and rocks, a sand bottom helps separate the overall terrarium from the table. Various types of moss are used to fill in the scene and slowly conceal our mini deity. Remember I told you it took a month of research to make this terrarium. That's like 730 hours of information overload with Japanese culture. I couldn't fit all of that Shinto wisdom into one 4-inch jar, so I made another one. Now, being in this niche for as long as I have been and maintaining all of these micro ecosystems, it would make sense that I have a passion for similar niches like gardening or landscape. Something that I've noticed in a number of traditional Japanese gardens, besides the use of unique rocks, are the little rock lamps you see in many of them. Those are called ishidoro, which translates to stone lantern, which is another hint of Buddhist influence into Shintoism. At one point in time, Buddhists and Shinto worshipped their individual religions in the same temple. It wasn't until 1868 when the two religions were officially separated and the temples became a place for worship with Buddha and shrines became a place of worship for kami. Toro lanterns are one of the few Buddhist objects that remain in Shinto shrines until this day. I found that really interesting. I think that, combined with the significance of the object representing a sort of peaceful Zen place, is why you can find them in gardens throughout the world. With that being said, I felt like I definitely needed to have one in my very own place of meditation. Since I personally prefer a more greenery type of scene, opposed to the traditional sand-dominant rock gardens, I decided to cover my rocky terrain with a carpeting moss. Another must-have modification I wanted this terrarium to have was the Toro lantern with actual lights. This was a pretty easy mod, with a simple LED light taped around 2 watch batteries. You see, each part of the Ishidoro has a symbolic meaning to the 5 elements of Buddhist cosmology, with the light representing flame. With all of this knowledge and newfound admiration for Japanese culture and better understanding of Shintoism, I felt compelled to make my very own shrine for a kami that might bring my little ecosystems fortune and prosperity. But before I could do that, I wanted to get a better understanding of Japanese architecture, which brings me to this paludarium. So in the prehistoric days of Japan, architecture revolved around the basic needs of the hunter-gatherer population. It made sense that structural designs were simple and efficient for that use specifically. Shrines were shallow and built for temporary use. And it wasn't until, once again, Buddhism was introduced, where Japan started to see its first significant change in architecture. The development of larger scale, permanent temple building with the use of complicated woodworking techniques led to the trendy thatched and tile roofs we see in Japan today. This traditional look was the inspiration behind the little village I decided to make for this paludarium. With Japan being made up of so many islands, I felt like water needed to be present in this setup in order to have a convincingly realistic look. The terrain that this island rests on is a series of lava rocks that are hot glued together, gently resting on a pillar of larger rocks. I kept a consistency with plants for this one and used the same mosses I had from the first 2 terrariums. Now I'm ready to build the ultimate Shinto shrine terrarium. We've covered a lot of information so far, and if you've been following along, you probably understand why this needed to happen for me. After well over 44,000 minutes of binging on the origins of the place that brought us anime, it was time to put all of that together in the most unique way I know possible. An aquatic terrarium shrine for the deity of general prosperity and agriculture, amongst many other things. Anari. This shrine was built from the ground up with the intent to house moving water. After drilling a hole into the back of the vase for my pump wires, a wall of lava rock is hot glued all the way up this 8-inch vase. After carefully crafting the hardscape in a way that channeled the flowing water back down the terrarium without splashing against the glass, moss is strategically placed over the hot glue areas and large gaps to give more of a solid appearance to the overall structure. A torii gate is a very symbolic landmark that certifies every Shinto shrine and marks the beginning of the sacred land. A chozuya is a cleansing fountain for washing hands and feet before you embark on your sacred pilgrimage. This smaller building is called a heiden. It's the hall of worship and usually found near the main sanctuary. The bridge, or sando, is a representation of the sacred journey. These are usually placed closer to the torii gate, but I felt like it was much more fitting over the river just outside of our main sanctuary, the honden. I hope she accepts my offerings. So there you have it, Buddhist influence on Japanese culture and Shinto's influence on my terrariums. These models, as well as the detailed written tutorials for each of these tanks, are available in the description down below. If you all enjoyed this journey and would love to see where we go next, hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you think we should go next on this Bantam.Earth experience.